Good morning, everybody. Good morning. You know, it's a thrill to be here today, and a thrill to be part of this press conference to talk about Freedom Summit. And to be here, two of them talking about this press conference and talking about Freedom Summit. We are in a very unique situation. Actually, if you look throughout our various different places where we live, throughout the country and particularly throughout the South, every place has some unique and historic aspects to it. We could be in Birmingham and we could be talking about the anniversary of the Davis Devil. We certainly could be in Memphis talking about the assassination of Brother Martin Luther King. Or we can be in Atlanta talking about the number of things that the snake did there on the ground and the various other struggles which occurred in our march forward for liberation and freedom. But there's something special about this spot on the earth and this place in the world that can never be duplicated, never be imitated. And here we are, right here, about to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the things that shook the Dixiecrats and shook the world. We're about to celebrate the tremendous diligence and insistence of young men. It used to be young men. Young men, like Hollis Watkins and others who just innately and indigenously took up the struggle and said that they weren't going to be pushed around, they weren't going to be abused. We're here to talk about Fannie Lou Hamer and about Bob Moses and the careful way that he laid out the struggle, understanding that leaders don't always have to be out front, but sometimes they can be in the back making things happen out front. A very special struggle we have as we look back, and we look back at the Mississippi March, Vernon Davis. We look back at Medgar Evers, whose 50th anniversary of his commemoration we celebrate this year. Emmett Till, who just shocked the world. And I think in probably every freedom struggle, his image in that Jet magazine is frozen in our head forever. Right? And so there's no way to duplicate this marking of history anywhere else in the country, anywhere else on the world. And what's more important is there's no way else that we can have a place that marks the steps forward anywhere else in Jackson, Mississippi, and Mississippi in general. This is the way forward. At a time when those victories won largely because of the strength of places like the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and their challenge to the Dixiecrats, the Voters' Rights Acts and things of that nature, is being challenged, where different sections are being struck from enforcement. At that time, at the time where a young man was murdered over there in Florida, and we have the replication of just so many horrid events in our minds that we have seen in Mississippi and everywhere else in the world. At the time that people drank tea and called it a party, right? And at the same time are planning for the destruction of the liberation movement in many different ways. This is a place where we have new life and a new opportunity to move ahead. We mark this year not only for where we've been, but for where we're going, right? I'm delighted to come here. They say I'm supposed to bring you the greetings. You know, it's interesting when they want to put you on the agenda, don't know exactly what they want you to do. They just put in that. They say they have somebody bring the welcome and somebody bring the greetings, right? I'm trying to figure out the difference between the welcome and the greetings, right? But at the same time, y'all know you're all welcome here, you know, and this is all ours. So I don't really have to say anything special to welcome you here. I just have to say that I'm happy to be here with you, and that we're going to move forward. And I think we need to make this we need to put everything into this. You know, we need to be all hands on deck. As we used to say in football and in basketball, we need to leave it all on the field or all on the floor, right? We need to put it all out there, and let's show the world where we are. Let's show the world where we're going, and let's get ready to pass those batons to the young people becoming before us with the correct perspective of what has actually happened in history, so that we can shape from this civil rights struggle a real human rights struggle, which will vindicate our struggle here and vindicate the struggle of oppressed people throughout the world. Thank you very much.
Whose life matters? Whose or what interests matter? In 1865, a mass meeting of formerly enslaved Africans was held in Vicksburg, Mississippi. The attendees called on the Congress of the United States not to restore Mississippi to the Union until she had ensured that democracy would work for all of its people. Armed with only a vision of justice and equity, as well as an embedded sense of determination, the formerly enslaved population of the state of Mississippi started families, acquired land, organized churches, and established schools. By 1875, anti-democratic forces using violence and intimidation sought to darken the vision and dampen the determination of the formerly enslaved. By 1890, the legislative, executive, and judicial system of the state of Mississippi worked in concert to prevent democracy from being realized. For the next 70 years, in spite of the violence, the intimidation, and the conservative legislative and judicial system, the struggle and resistance of the formerly enslaved and their descendants continued. By 1960, that struggle and that resistance movement was beginning to crystallize. Young people, volunteers, students committed themselves, their lives, skills to the resistance movement, and as a result of their determination, were deployed all over the state of Mississippi to assist local people and local communities in making democracy work. In 1964, a call was issued, likened unto the Macedonian call of old. Come over here. Come here to the state of Mississippi. And as a result of that call, over 1,000 students and young people and volunteers responded. As a result of that call, nearly 600 medical and allied medical practitioners responded. As a result of that call, several hundred legal and legal aid practitioners responded. These volunteers joined and added their supports, their time, their talent, their resources to the local people's resistance movement that had existed for well over 100 years. This fusion, this collaboration of skills, ideas, and efforts produced a degree of democracy that had never before been obtained. The residual effects of the summer of 1964, the residual effects of Freedom Summer provided benefits that we enjoy today. The Civil Rights Bill of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, Community Service Associations, Legal Service Associations, the accessibility for those with physical challenges and physical impairments, and more openness for women. Today, we prepare to celebrate the battles that were fought and the victories that were won. Today, we prepare to acknowledge the accomplishments and honor the participants. Today, we again issue a call to people who love justice, to people who desire equity, to people who want democracy to work, to come to Mississippi, the people whose decisions at that time are making a difference right now. Come and join us in this, what we plan as a great celebration. Those who participated in and out of the state, come and bring your descendants and your posterity. Those that participated in and around the state, come and bring your friends and your family. Those who want to write about the events of the 60s, those who want to make movies, films, conduct interviews, come and get your first-hand reports. Though we pause to celebrate, we are mindful that the struggle to make democracy work still continues. Many forces today are still at work, anti-democratic forces, to prevent people from being all that God would have us to be. Legislation still forces, still promotes policies that cause us to ask the question, whose life matters? Judicial forces still limit democracy and cause us to ask the question, who or what issues matter? So join us in June 2014, collectively and collaboratively, in an effort to continue to make democracy work.
There's not much more I can say, but I am glad that the NAACP, our staff, our boys are able to support this effort. For us, particularly me, I wouldn't be standing here today if it was not for the veterans and all of what was done 50 years ago, prior and after. It was on this campus that I learned of the history of struggle. It was on this campus that I learned the current mayor and Hollis Watkins and many other people. It was on this campus that the movement was nurtured. So it is appropriate that we announce this activity that we're going to be taking on, not only in June, because our goal is to plan a year long of activities, but not just to commemorate, but actually do some things to have impact. Freedom Supper is about regime change, impacting how policy and politics work to ensure that all people have an opportunity to live with dignity in this state, in this country. Today we're facing some of the very same things. So we can't come and just celebrate as if everything was fixed. Mm-hmm. We also must recognize that the movement continued, that the movement was here prior to 50 years ago, that the movement continues to be here because the rights, the dignity, and the respect of all humans should be protected in this nation and around the world. So we stand in support of the veterans. We want to make sure that they are highlighted. We want to make sure that they are appreciated and celebrated. We also want to make sure that everyone who participates understands that we all have a responsibility to continue the work, continue the legacy, and to protect the rights for all citizens of this country and around the world.
Thank you, Derek. So we got a lot of different people that supported this effort. And this time we're going to ask another one of our young men to come and give a few remarks. At the time the call was given, in reference to 1964, there was a young man that was already out there on the firing line, perhaps singing another song to folks, telling them to get on board, because all of us was needed. And he is now serving as one of the national co-chairs of this 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer. And for those that don't have enough history of the people, know who I'm talking about my longtime friend, co-worker in the struggle for justice, Brother Hank Thomas. He is one of the original freedom riders. So naturally, he wanted people to get on board this struggle as well as those individual buses. Thanks.
There's a certain amount of irony with me being here, ready to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Mississippi Freedom Song. During the Vietnam War, a total of 836 Mississippians were killed. And of that number, a little over 400 of them were African Americans. And I said the irony is, while African Americans were fighting and dying in Vietnam for the rights, the voting rights of the Vietnamese, they could not vote here in Mississippi, or they would have had trouble voting here in Mississippi. And if some of those who survived, one or two may have come back with even the Congressional Medal of Honor, they would not have been able to vote in Mississippi. So the irony is, I don't know if there is a representative here from the governor's office, or the governor even thought about coming, but if for no other reason than to honor the memory and to honor the service of the African Americans in the military who were fighting for freedom, I would have thought that it would have been proper, at least for somebody from the governor's office, to acknowledge that. The other irony is 50 years ago, you were fighting the white Democratic Party for the right to vote. Today, you're fighting the white Republican Party at voter suppression. And I think all of us probably felt the way I did, that with the election of President Obama, indeed, we had, shall we say, reached the promised land, or the post-racial society. But a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court decision told us not necessarily so. So it's not called keeping you from voting, it's called suppressing the vote. And I am told that the night of his inauguration at the inaugural ball, that you had Republicans saying this must not happen again. And the way we're going to keep it from happening, we're going to keep blacks and Latinos legally from voting, and it's called voter suppression. So the fight goes on. And if there was apathy to a certain extent for us thinking that we finally won, the Supreme Court has reminded us not necessarily so. So the renewed effort to keep the right to vote is alive and well, and certainly fighting the efforts of the state legislature like the state of Mississippi and other legislation to enact laws that make it very difficult for people of color to vote. So the fight continues, and I'm certainly happy to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. That was another young man who answered to a call in the form of a song where it said, "Go down, Moses, way down in Mississippi, tell old bondage to let my people go." All right. Now, so you know I'm talking about Bob Moses, who came down as part of this, and Bob is also the founder and president of the Algebra Project, and also serving as honorary co-chair of this 50th anniversary. See, Bob don't like for you to give him certain kinds of things, but when you're running things, you either play in the game or you sit on the sideline. So Bob decided he's going to be in the game.
How's everybody? So I'd like to kind of put a different context on what everybody has been talking about, and ask us to think about what we're getting ready to do in terms of a conundrum that's kind of built into our country. If you think about the preamble to the Constitution, it does not say we the states, we the president, or we the Congress, or we the Supreme Court. It couldn't. It had to say we the people. But then after the Constitution was written, it had to be taken to the states to ratify. So Hank was a freedom rider coming across Alabama and Mississippi. He wasn't asking Alabama and Mississippi to guarantee him his right. He wasn't thinking that the states need to do something. He was looking to the national government. He was saying to himself and to everybody, I'm a citizen of this country and it means something. Right? So the sharecroppers that we work with in the Delta, they were saying the same thing. They weren't looking to the state of Mississippi. They were saying to themselves, I'm a citizen. I'm a part of we the people. It means something. And I need the government to make citizenship substantive. The same thing for Faneuil Hamer and all of the representatives in the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. They were looking to the national constituency of the National Democratic Party to justify and to affirm their right to participate in national party events and affairs. So this is a conundrum that's built into the country. The issue of whether or not citizenship is substantive and means something versus the issue of, well, to get this country going, we had to have states come together and ratify the Constitution. And so that conundrum gets played out over and over and over again. What I think has really happened across the legacy of the country is that the class of we the people, the actual extension of who we the people are, has expanded, right? In spite of ourselves. And it expands roughly in time units of 3/4 of a century. And so we're celebrating the 50th of a lot of things, like people have said, and 50 is 2/3 of 75. Right? So we are on our way, whether we like it or not, into our third 3/4 of a century. And the country's going to lurch. It's not going to stand still, folks. It's either going to lurch back or it's going to lurch forward, right? And the issue that needs to be remembered here as we gather and, through this year-long activities is, well, how do we help the country to lurch forward? Right. Just think in 1787, when we started, we had two classes of people. We had constitutional people and constitutional property. And we went that way for roughly 3/4 of the century. And then the constitutional people had a huge falling out with each other, 600,000 murdering each other. over their constitutional property. And then we decided, well, we're not going to have constitutional property anymore, but we couldn't quite decide that the former constitutional property and their descendants should really be constitutional people in the country. And so we went for another 75 years in what black men call slavery by another name, Jim Crow, right? He identifies the official ending of that slavery by another name, December 12, 1941. Biddle, who was the Attorney General of the United States, sent out a letter to all of the Attorney Generals, the state Attorney Generals, telling them that they should now think of peonage as involuntary slavery and should prosecute, right? They did that on December 12th because, as we know, on December 7th, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And Roosevelt knew that African Americans who were going to be in the army, like Hank said, right, would be propagandized by the Japanese. And so he moved to officially end slavery by another name, right, with his Attorney General. So the Civil Rights Movement, in some sense, was the next lurch forward, right? We got Jim Crow, slavery by another name, out of 3 distinct areas. Been talked about here. As Frank was talking, we got it out of public accommodations, we got it out of the right to vote, and we got it out of the National Democratic Party structure. We didn't get it out of education, right? And as Hank has reminded us, we still have some work to do about voting. So if we think about the expansion of this, who people are, who are the constitutional people, as we move into this across the year, there are 2 distinct areas that I think we need to actually focus on. One is an affirmative right to vote. What we have now is a negative right to vote, which says that, well, the states can't stop you, right, from doing this or that for these reasons. But it's not like the Second Amendment, which says because of such and such and such, people have a right to bear arms. So we need a constitutional right to vote, which sounds something like that, right? Because of such and such and such, whatever it is that we think about our democracy, people have a right to vote, and the government has the duty to ensure that people have access to the vote. We need to stop being on the defensive. We will be on the defensive forever, right? Unless we take the initiative and say, we are going to ensure that the right to vote is as important as the right to bear arms. Right? We also need to extend constitutional personhood to the young people. Right? Constitutional personhood has been extended to all classes of adults in this country, but young people do not have constitutional status, and they need constitutional status, if for nothing else, than to protect their health and to protect their education. Right? Because young people spend most of their lives in an institution for which the national government really does not have responsibility. So we need a constitutional amendment that says that young people have a constitutional right to an education in this country. So those are at least 2 things that we need to work on as we move forward to this next lurch. We need to lurch forward, folks. If we don't lurch forward, we are going to lurch backwards.
I think what you're going to see next summer in terms of the young people is what you saw in '64. Young people coming from across the country with a shared vision to do something different, not only in the places that they are, but to use the things that they're doing different in the places that they are to move this country in a different direction once again. So one of the things that I'm definitely looking forward to is we're going to unveil a slate of candidates between the ages of 20 and 35 that want to run for statewide or local office in the places that they are. So they'll be trained here in Mississippi. They'll learn how to build campaigns, how to build messaging for their campaign. We'll look at the formation of a political action committee to support young people across the country that's running for office. And then we also are going to be looking to run young people in Mississippi under the banner of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. So I think an example of that is the victory that Chokwe Lumumba just had, and I think that that's something that needs to be duplicated across the state and across the country. So we're looking forward to it. We're hoping that everybody that's coming is looking forward to interacting with young people and sharing the rich history and knowledge that you have. When I think about Freedom Summer and the gathering of young people, I think about the benefit of what it is to gather young people again 50 years later, and to look at the advantage that we have when we come together next year is that we're able to deal with people who've been there before, who fought this country and who fought this state before, and they're able to be our resources and our support and our way forward. And so I want to thank y'all, everybody that's involved, and we're looking forward to really getting to the work next summer. So thank you, Hollis.
50 years ago, I was a 15-year-old little dusty country girl growing up in the rural area of Madison County, about 45 minutes from here. And I remember Freedom Summer. I remember it through the eyes of my father and our family and Hollis and many of you. I bring you greetings from Marion Wright Edelman, who's traveling and is enthused about the activities that will take place over the next several years in recognition of both Freedom Summer and some other things. CDF will be 40 years old this year, so we're looking forward to those activities as well. In 1995, Marion started the Children's Defense Fund sponsored Freedom Schools program for young people across the country. Many of you sitting in this room, Bob and Al and Hank and Hollis and others have infused that training of these young people. Since 1995, we have trained over 10,000 college-age student leaders that have operated summer and after-school programs based on the Freedom School model in over 130 communities with sponsoring organizations, cities across the country, serving 100,000 young people in summer and after-school programming. We also have operated something now called, and Al has been very much involved with this, called the Young Advocate Leadership Trainers Leadership Program, and Frank has been there as well, where we are seeking to train over 5,000 young people to become advocates for children and families. Because we recognize, as do all of you, that we have got to leave something behind. That many of us thought we would have been at a place in this country now where we would not have to be worried about our children getting shot down and our children not being educated and our families not suffering and losing voting rights. But now we recognize, as some of us always recognized, I think, that this is not a game you can win and walk away from. It's always a game changer. There's always somebody out there that we have to be vigilant about. And in this particular point in time, it's really scary for me as a grandmother to think about my young 8-, 9-year-old black boys and not making sure that as we go through the summer, Bob, as you have talked about, that there are things that we have to really use the resources we have to try to put in place to make sure that those young people are able to thrive and live lives worthy of human dignity and in this country. So we are in this game, however you want to use us. We will have young people in communities across the country in the summer of 2014. We will have young people here in Mississippi, Al, if you want us here. And we are just pleased to be part of it, and Marion sends you all her best wishes and love. Thank you.
People can be demanding. We sang a song before. I'll just do the imitation of the song of "Get on board, children, children, get on board, children, children, get on board, children, children, let's fight for human rights."
Good morning. I'm Ashley Wiggs, and I bring you greetings on behalf of the Magnolia Bar Association. The Magnolia Bar Association was founded in 1955, and we represent minority and other lawyers throughout the state of Mississippi. And we were a part of the movement in 1964, and we will continue to be a part of the movement. We are really excited and appreciative to be a part of the 50th anniversary conference, and we will do what we can to support in any way we can. Thank you.
How's everybody doing? Good. So glad that you were able to make it today. Just want to close out with just a few acknowledgments. A couple of our community partners were not able to be here, but they did send a statement, and I'd like to read that at this time. On behalf of the SNCC Legacy Project, I want to formally express what you and the veterans of the Mississippi Freedom Movement already know: our strong support for pending plans to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the 1964 Mississippi Summer in June 2014. This commemoration, we feel, will be much more than celebration of that summer, but also is a recognition of how profoundly the Mississippi Freedom Movement, a movement led by Mississippians, it should never be forgotten. It changed the nation. The 50th commemoration also gives us the opportunity to remind all that, as well as recognition and celebration, there's obligation and opportunity to continue the struggle. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Our words as pertinent and relevant today as when Ella Baker spoke them during the state convention of the MFDP 50 years ago. There's no better example of this than the veterans group of which you are president. This was directed to your Highness. As you also know, SNCC was deeply involved with Mississippi, and I want to let you know in this brief note on behalf of the SNCC Legacy Project Board that we are fully committed to assisting plans for the 50th in whatever manner you desire and within our limited means. Aluta continua, with warm regards, Cortland Cox, Chairman. My dear friends, I am sorry that I am unable to be with you for the 50th anniversary Freedom Summer Planning Session. I wanted to share my thoughts with you. 50 years ago, you joined with the people of Mississippi who were engaged in the long and painful struggle to become equal participants in and beneficiaries of the state and nation. They and you understood that the effort would be painful and at great cost. Perhaps none of us then realized that 50 years later, the goal would still need to be reached. Just this June, the United States Supreme Court, by a divided vote, eviscerated the 1965 Voting Rights Act, purchased with so many years of blood and tears. We know that people of color and immigrant populations increasingly are being targeted by devious schemes to eliminate their opportunity to vote and thus to deprive the growing majority of participation in the governance of our country. We must continue the struggle for full and unfettered implementation of the 15th Amendment, which provides in clear and unequivocal terms. Section 1, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Section 2, the Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Sections 4 and 5 of the Voting Rights Act were adopted to confront the deliberate denial of the right to vote in 5 southern states and a few other voting districts. Today's insidious interference with the right to vote on a far broader scale calls for new and more universal legislation grounded in the 15th Amendment. The remedial scope needs to reach every state and voting district where the franchise is once again being threatened. In order to accomplish this difficult task, it will be necessary for all of us and many of our friends and supporters throughout the nation to become vocal activists once again. Congress needs to know we will not be still. Yet again, it will take a mass movement to get Congress to act. This renewed commitment is the best way to honor the struggle. Thank you. This comes from Mrs. Rita Schwerner-Bender. And lastly, 50 years ago, there came from many quarters of our nation a youthful diversity of ethnicities, opinions, lifestyles, and persuasions, a cadre of risk-takers committed to lifting the last burden from the shoulders of the world's last oppressed woman and man. Our coming together was more than idealism that has since been celebrated as the Mississippi Summer of 1964. While countless pundits from without have vertically described, discussed, and even extolled the seasonal events of that year, this is the rare occasion, some 50 years later, for a horizontal view of those who survived to tell the story, its origins, frustrations, triumphs, and its aspirations as well as hope. And it remains for our successors to become better than they can now foresee. It was more than uplifting rhetoric and freedom songs. It was pragmatic and tedious, dangerous and deadly, not only for us, but more importantly for the local people who believed in us with their lives. May this passage of time reveal what the present once obscured. It comes as a special comfort to know that we were far better then than we could have ever known. And it remains for our successors to become better than they can now foresee. Words crack and crumble under the strain of fully describing those 1964 days on paper. But during these days of our assembly, our authentic faces and voices can uniquely make history live and breathe and teach greater moral bandwidth for a new generation. The nostalgia of our being here once more together is more than the remembering of our pain. It is the memory of our collective possibilities as well to change the world. And this was sent in by Dr. Timothy Jenkins. And lastly, I'd like to just acknowledge the Office of the President here at Tougaloo College, along with the Office of Dr. Dolores Bolden Stamp and her staff. I'd like to acknowledge the Board of the Veterans of the Mississippi Civil Rights Movement. I'd like to also acknowledge the Jackson Convention and Visitors Bureau and the Jackson Convention Complex. We have some of the members here with the stand. Just want to acknowledge the convention center. And also we have some other guests visiting with us today, and I'd like to introduce Miss Julia Cheney Moss, who is the sister of James Cheney, and I'm not sure if you decided if you wanted to make some remarks or not. Okay. Julie's here with us. And we also want to let you know that there are other celebrations being planned throughout the state. Macomb, Mississippi, Hattiesburg, Meridian, Sunflower County. Mr. Chen, we got to get Canton going. All right, so we're going to add Canton and Oneida. We've got to get Canton going. So there are other celebrations that will be planned throughout the year. Again, we want to thank you for coming. Just one more minute. There are wonderful plans for next year. We've already secured the exhibit entitled This Light of Ours, which was suggested to us by Charlie Cobb, and the Mississippi Museum of Art has agreed to dedicate their entire space to the complete exhibit. So this will be unveiled during the Freedom Summer 50th of next year, so we're glad about that. And I think we have a representative from the Mississippi Museum of Art. Okay, you want to stand? Also, we're looking forward to a major street festival. We want to honor all of the Mississippi African American elected officials, the members of the United States Congressional Black Caucus. We have just a lot of things planned for next year, so make sure you go to our website, msfreedomsummer50.com. Starting Monday, you'll be able to gather all of the information that is being planned for next year.